Hey everyone, so I know the other day we kind of mentioned about the lures when I was talking about the jesses. So today what I thought we'd do is kind of show you how we make them, explain kind of why they're that way, and just talk a little bit more about them. So we start off with, of course, this big strip of leather. Like I said, for the lures, we use Austin double shoulder. So we buy it in big sheets, and then most of what we make out of it is the lures. We will make some cuffs out of it, so I've got that cuff over here still. But most of the leather really goes to making the lures. And so we actually have a template of our lure. And so we can just kind of lay this down on the leather, try and make sure I get close to the edge as possible, because I don't want to waste too much leather, it's expensive. And then we just kind of trace around it with a pencil. If you use a pen, you're going to be able to see that sometimes, and it's just not as neat and narrow of lines as you would get with a pencil. So I'm using a pencil, trace it out, and so now I've got the outline of the lure. This hole in the top is where the leash would go. And so, on the field, we're swinging it. So we put a piece of leather through that hole. So we'll have to punch that out later also. And then just get your good pair of scissors. And it's a lot easier if you kind of cut close to that line, but not really exact. And then once you get it all cut out, then do a lot of trimming. It's really hard to move this big sheet of leather if it's not cut out in a smaller piece. And so cut out a smaller piece, and then you're going to trim up the rest of it. I've actually got all of this year's already done, and so this is a set. This is actually for game number 3. I don't know if that's going to show 3 or E, but it's game 3, which would be Kentucky this year. And then we actually have our volunteers. We actually open it up to them to design these lures. I showed you this one, which is just kind of stamped, just says War Eagle 2019. That's one we used for Aria last year. It's got all those talon marks on it. You can see lots of talon marks on it from where they touch it and scrape it. But it's kind of bland, I guess. But we actually get our volunteers to submit designs for these lures. And so one of our volunteers submitted this design for this year. So it's for the Kentucky game. So Auburn versus Kentucky, the date on one side, and then on the other side, Sanford Hall with a tree, and then glory, glory to Auburn. And so that actually has gone to our trademark and licensing office. And they will either approve or deny it, make recommendations. Luckily, our trademark and licensing office does a great job. They've never really had much feedback for us. But then it also has to get sent to the opposing team's trademark and licensing office. Since it's got that University of Kentucky on there, it's got to be approved by them also. Sometimes that's where we get some holdups. They would some of the teams don't always like tigers attacking other animals or eagles attacking other animals. But usually the trademark offices are really good. They approve it. They know that's a nice fundraiser for us, and it's not really causing them any harm. We're not destroying their image or anything like that. So once you get it cut out, trimmed up and everything, then what you'd do is you would go along the edge with, you get your leather punchers, and you'd go along the edge and punch out the little tiny holes all the way around. Now there is no I don't have any certain distance that I use. I kind of just go around it and just punch whenever I feel like it. And then those are for the stitching. And so when I stitch it up, that's where the thread's going to go through. It just makes it a little bit easier for me to have those holes punched already. And like I said, it's got that big hole at the top, which is where the leash would go through once we're using it, either in practice or on game day. And so I'm going to work on kind of trimming these up, getting them kind of punched and everything, get them ready to stitch up, and then later we're going to kind of show you the stitching that we do, what they're filled with. That's a common question that we get, what's inside of these lures. Kind of talk a little bit more about them also. So now that these are all cut out, we've got the holes punched in them, the most important step is going home so you can watch TV while you stitch these together. Now, first thing you'll do is you're going to line them up again, make sure everything fits perfectly. Then you get a straight needle, a little bit of string on it, and you're actually going to stitch together this part here. Just this little semicircle, kind of stitch them together, and that way they won't separate while you're trying to stitch the outside border. Now I've gone around it once, but I still have spaces in between where the string goes, and so now I need to go back around the other way to make it look like there's the thread all the way around instead of just kind of every other opening. And so now I've got the thread going through each hole on both sides. So you just kind of cut it off and tie it together now. So now that we've got the center piece stitched together, we're going to work on the outside edge. To do that, I use the hooked needle, and then we use this kind of waxed coated nylon thread, and I know that takes about 1, 2, takes me almost 3 pulls, 3 arm lengths of it to get all the way around twice. So I cut off what I need. Then I'm going to attach it to that kind of hooked needle that I've got. First I gotta remove the one from my last one. So now with this one I'm gonna start at the top, pull my thread almost all the way through, saving a little bit that I can tie into on this back side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that down and pull this piece back over to the back side and go back through. So I'm keeping it the same direction each time. So pulling it through this way, tightening it, make sure I get it good and tight, then bring it back on the back side. So I'm always going from the back to the front, and that way I get it to seal on this outside. Now before you get to the end and seal it up, you want to put the filling inside. I love asking people what they think is inside the lures that we use on game day or in practice, because I've heard all sorts of crazy things. Lots of people think that we put food in there, which is what the eagles come to on game day. I'm not really sure how they think the eagle would get the food out of the inside of this. So we've heard all sorts of weird things. The truth is they are filled with my shopping bags. So one way to recycle shopping bags, I never have too many. I honestly collect shopping bags almost all year just to fill up 7 to 8 lures for the games. And so I can stuff a lot of them in here. Now the reason they're this shape is because you want to make sure that it's something that the eagles can't hold on to, can't get their talons all the way around. If it's something shaped like this, where they can get their foot pretty much all the way around it, you'll never be able to get that away from them. That's theirs. You can't force them to release that. With this shape, it's actually bigger than their talons, and so they can't ever really hold on to it too well. And so that's why it's this shape. So I'm going to start filling this with shopping bags. So we'll fast forward through all this. I'll let you know how many I put in here though, because that's one question that people ask me all the time. I don't really know why, but we'll see how many I can cram in here this time. So I was able to get about 15 or so shopping bags in here. What I've done now is I've gone back around and stitched it the other way, so still going back to front, but just stitched it counterclockwise this time, and that kind of just seals up any kind of openings, gives it a nice kind of crisscross pattern along the side, and so now it looks, in my opinion, really nice and able to be used. You don't want any kind of openings along the side, because when the Eagles hit it, you don't want the shopping bags to explode. We've had that happen sometimes when if you didn't get the stitch, tight enough, the shopping bags will kind of explode out the side when they hit it, because they bring in a good bit of force when they're landing on it. Now, the reason they come to this on game day is because they're trained that every time they touch it, they get a food reward. So it's just training. You could use any object. Like I said earlier, the reason we use this shape is so they can't grab it. But you could really use any object that you want. We've seen some funny stories, though, from other bird keepers throughout the country and the world about using different objects to train the birds to come to. You really have to be careful with that, because you don't want it to be something that they would commonly see among the public. So like for us, we want to train them to, baseball caps. Think of all the baseball caps or the, hats that are in the stadium on game day. You definitely don't want them coming to somebody who's wearing a hat. Footballs even. You don't really want them coming to a football. Think of all the footballs that are in the stadium on game day. And so hopefully not too many people will have a circular piece of leather swinging around when the Eagles are out. Don't get any ideas, because if you do, we're going to have to stop flying them, because we definitely can't have them going to other people. So we'll swing this on the field. They know that as soon as they see it, they're supposed to come to it, because that's how they get their food. We'll toss it down as soon as they touch this with their feet. And so that's a little bit about the lures that we use. Like I mentioned earlier, we do auction them off after each game. So we make them unique for each and every game. We'll auction them off. The auctions start on the Thursdays before the game and go to the Mondays after the game. So if you're interested in that, you can go to our website, again, auburn.edu/raptor, and then click on the Game Day Eagle and Lure Auction, Game Day Lure Auction. Click on that. You can learn more about that, and then hopefully we'll have, if everyone listens to instructions, we will have football this fall, and we'll be able to auction off this season's lures that the Eagles come to. So go to our website, learn more about that if you want. And thanks for tuning in. Everyone stay safe. Keep watching and sharing these videos. War Eagle.